I have more autonomy and more choice when I could have exposure to not 100 bands that sound just like one of my favorite bands, but 10 bands that actually sound very different.
In one of your articles, you were talking about algorithms with social media. And the algorithms for people's feeds are really based on their interests. And a lot of times these algorithms are designed to feed you more things to reinforce your beliefs. How do you feel about the ethics behind how they market to people who they already know their beliefs, but at the same time shouldn't exploit it?
That's a tough one. And one of the reasons it's a tough one for me is because it's very clear that that environment can be problematic in lots of ways. We've all heard a lot of discussion about the fact that the social media environment and the algorithms that drive it probably has a lot to do with our political and social divisions today, a lot to do with what makes it hard for us to engage with ideas and people that are very different than we are. But by the same token, from a marketing perspective, it's also very exciting that these environments have created so much opportunity for small businesses and entrepreneurs. There's sort of a cruel irony in the fact that these same tools that have empowered people like you and me to create our own businesses and to access the kinds of platforms and the kind of audience reach that were only reserved for the biggest companies with the greatest amounts of resources before the digital era, have also made it possible for those same companies to use those algorithms in unethical and exploitative kind of ways. Predictive algorithms make it more likely that you're going to see the things that you want to see, and you're going to already be interested in the brands and products that you're going to be exposed to, making consumer decisions easier than they would be otherwise. You're going to see things that you might not know existed before because those messages can be so precisely targeted to your personality, to your past behavior, to your interests. In that sense, there's a certain kind of societal good that comes from that. There's an enormous amount of waste in the advertising industry. If you think about all the messages that go unattended, all the messages that land with the wrong audience. Famous quote that is, I think, attributed to Wanamaker, the guy who opened one of the first gigantic departmental superstores in the early 20th century, who said that half of all my advertising dollars are wasted, but I don't know which half.
Yep.
Social media environment goes a long way towards reducing a lot of that unnecessary waste, like not physical waste like trash, but in a sense it is. It's sort of cognitive waste. It's a bunch of noise bouncing around in my head that I really don't need to be exposed to. It just distracts me and clutters my mind with products that I don't really care about and wouldn't be interested in consuming, right? The flip side is that you could argue it also undermines consumer autonomy. If all I'm exposed to is the kind of stuff that I was already interested in before I even knew that I was going to be interested in it, then I'm not exercising a lot of volition or autonomy in the consumer choices that I make. It's almost like it removes the experience of serendipity from the equation. Kind of like you were saying earlier in terms of how do you create a brand that stands apart from the crowd, that's exciting, that's unexpected. You could argue that maybe that's a little bit harder to do in this environment simply because the whole environment is built on predictability and consistency, right? I'm a huge music guy. I know that Matt is too. I use Spotify and I use endless playback, and it's just like this totally passive process by which I continually just get served up stuff that sounds like the kind of stuff that I'm used to hearing. It's the right formula, right? But where's the exciting, innovative, interesting thing that Spotify doesn't know I might not even like yet because I haven't even had the opportunity to be exposed to it to know that I would like it in a way that's going to impact my behavior. The same way it might work if I was browsing a record store and you buy something because you have no idea what it's going to sound like. It speaks to you because of the imagery on the cover of the album, or the name of the band, or the way the people look on the back, or the names of the songs. And maybe it's completely different than anything you've ever heard, but you grow as a result of it. It changes you. It exposes you to new things. It creates interest in new things that you weren't interested in before. I really worry about undermining not just autonomy and our volition, our exercise of conscious choice as consumers, but what is that doing to us as creative individuals? Exposure to novelty, serendipitous discoveries, being put into unfamiliar circumstances. These are the kinds of things that foster creativity, that make it possible for us to create exciting brands that stand apart from the crowds, and exciting new products that people didn't even know they would want before they knew that they could even exist.
In a lot of ways, even though we have all these choices, we're actually pretty limited. So it's like using your example of Spotify. Like, say I love classical rock, because I do. And the algorithms are constantly pushing classical rock, but I never hear like country. I never hear bluegrass. I never hear any of these other types of music. It's almost like the algorithms are saying, you're in this box. That's all you're going to get. And I can see, as for some businesses, if we bring this back into like marketing, how that can actually be a struggle for them to break into these new markets, because the algorithms are actually designed to keep them out.
It creates an illusion of choice, maybe, like you said. Now I can listen to 100 bands that sound just like The National, which is one of my favorite bands of all time, when maybe I have more autonomy and more choice when I could have exposure to not 100 bands that sound just like one of my favorite bands, but 10 bands that actually sound very different from that band. Maybe that will do a better job helping me figure out what I like and what will help foster growth and creativity for me.
I used to work in radio. I was a DJ and for a couple of stations, and one station was more of a modern rock. We used to play a lot of new songs. And that was my favorite part. I love introducing people to new bands and getting people hype on the new music that's coming out. And then I work for a classic rock station. Also love that music, but that's very limited too. That was almost like, before we had algorithms, that was, kind of an algorithm. It's like, okay, we know what a classic rock fan wants. They want AC/DC, they want Led Zeppelin, they want the Allman Brothers. And the playlist was about 300 songs, which sounds like a lot of music until you listen to it every single day. And you're like, oh, yeah, just heard this one a couple days ago. Okay, 300 is not a lot of songs. And I feel like this is what's happening in a lot of areas, especially with rock. Rock fans just want to keep listening to the stuff they're most comfortable with. And it makes it harder for young bands to get up there. It's like they have to work harder to get noticed. I hate to be a back in my day kind of guy, but in the 90s, it was like we were hungry for new music constantly. There's always something crazy, new stuff coming out. And it's like, okay, rock fans are a lot more comfortable. That's one of the downsides of the algorithm. It makes it easier for you to get what you want, but it makes it harder to find the stuff you want that you don't know you want.
It's the Stones, right? It's not what you want, it's what you need. It's what feeds your soul, right? It's what fosters growth and creativity and personal discovery.